The night my parents kicked me out didn't come with shouting or broken plates. It came quietly, which somehow made it hurt more. Silence has a way of telling you exactly how little you matter. My suitcase stood by the door, small enough to insult the years I had spent trying to be a good son. My mother leaned against the wall, arms folded tightly, her face unreadable. My father stood near the window, staring outside as if the darkness could explain what he couldn't say. "You can't stay here anymore," my mother finally said. Her voice was calm, practiced. "We've done enough. Enough." I wanted to ask when love started coming with conditions, but the words stayed stuck in my throat. I had lost my job 2 weeks earlier. The company shut down overnight, no warning, no mercy. I thought family was where you went when the world collapsed. I thought wrong. You're an adult. My father muttered without turning around. "Figure it out." That was it. No hug. No money slipped into my hand. No question about where I'd sleep. When I stepped outside, the door closed behind me with a soft click. That sound echoed louder than any scream. It felt final, like a verdict had been passed and my appeal denied. The street was empty, cold, unforgiving. I walked until my legs burned, then sat on a park bench under a flickering streetlight. My phone battery was dead. My hands shook, not from the cold, but from the realization that I was truly alone. I kept replaying memories, school awards they barely attended, nights I skipped my own dreams to help theirs. Every moment I chose family over myself. None of it had bought me a place to stay. That's when I thought of my grandfather. He was the only one who ever looked at me like I was enough. Before he died, he pressed an old, worn bank card into my hand. It looked useless, scratched, outdated, forgotten. "Don't use this unless you have to," he whispered. "When everyone turns their back on you, this will remind you who you are." I had smiled back then, thinking it was just sentiment, a keepsake, nothing more. Sitting alone in the dark, I pulled the card from my wallet. The edges were rough, the name barely visible. I traced it with my thumb, feeling something I hadn't felt all night. Hope. I didn't know what the card held. I didn't know if it still worked. But for the first time since the door closed behind me, I felt like my story wasn't over. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe this was the moment everything began. The bank doors slid open with a quiet hiss, and for a moment I hesitated before stepping inside. The marble floors gleamed, reflecting a version of myself I barely recognized. Wrinkled clothes, tired eyes, a man carrying the weight of last night's rejection. I didn't belong here. At least, that's what everyone's eyes seemed to say. I approached the counter slowly. The receptionist didn't look up at first, her fingers moving quickly over the keyboard. When she finally glanced at me, her polite smile faded just enough to reveal impatience. "How can I help you?" she asked. I reached into my pocket and placed the old bank card on the counter. It looked even more out of place under the bright lights, scratched, faded, like it belonged to another era. "I'd like to check the balance," I said quietly. She picked it up, turning it over with mild curiosity. A small, almost amused frown crossed her face. "This card is very old," she said. "Are you sure it's still active?" "I'm sure," I replied, though my voice betrayed uncertainty. She shrugged and typed in the card number. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then her fingers paused. She leaned closer to the screen, blinking as if she had read something wrong. She typed again. Her smile disappeared completely. Just a moment," she said, standing up too quickly. The chair scraped against the floor as she walked briskly toward a glass, walled office. People in line shifted, whispering. I stood frozen, heart pounding. I wondered if the card was invalid, if security would escort me out for wasting their time. Instead, a man in a tailored suit stepped out of the office. The bank manager. His confident expression changed the instant he looked at the card in the receptionist's trembling hand. "Sir," he said, approaching me, "may I have your name?" I told him. His face went pale. "Please come with me," he said, his tone suddenly formal, almost reverent. Inside his office, he closed the door and turned his computer screen toward me. For a moment, the numbers meant nothing. They were too large to understand, too unreal to accept. $1 2 100 0 0 0 0 0 0. My breath caught in my throat. "This account was opened by your grandfather over 50 years ago," the manager explained carefully. "A protected legacy trust. It has never been touched." My hands began to shake. "I didn't know." I whispered. The manager nodded slowly. "Given the amount, we must temporarily freeze the account for verification," he said. Then he stood up, straightened his jacket, and added quietly, "But I assure you, sir, this is very real." As I left the office, my legs felt weak. The world outside the bank looked the same, but nothing inside me was. My grandfather hadn't given me a card. He had given me a future. I didn't tell anyone about the money, not a friend, not a distant relative. I wanted silence, time to breathe, time to understand how a life could flip upside down so fast. But wealth has a sound, and somehow it always finds the people who once ignored you. 3 days after the bank visit, my phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. Her voice, when it came through, was softer than I remembered, almost careful. "We heard there was some kind of mistake," she said gently, "something about an account. We just wanted to check on you." A mistake. That's what my life had been to them until now. "I'm fine," I replied, keeping my voice steady. There was a pause. Then my father joined the call. "You should come home," he said. "Families don't let misunderstandings break them apart." I looked around my small temporary apartment. The clean bed, the quiet, the space that was finally mine. "I already have a place," I said. They came anyway. I heard the knock that evening, hesitant and unsure, like they were afraid I might not open the door. When I did, I saw something unfamiliar in their faces. Nervousness. My mother smiled too quickly. "We're so proud of you," she said, reaching out as if nothing had happened. I stepped back, just enough to create distance. Inside, we sat across from each other in silence. The same people who once spoke with authority now searched my face for approval. Things were stressful. My father finally said, "We did what we thought was right." I nodded slowly. "You did what was easy." The words weren't angry. They were honest, and honesty made them flinch. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We didn't know you'd be okay." "That's the problem," I replied. "You didn't care if I would be." Silence settled between us, thick and heavy. For the first time, the balance had shifted. I wasn't asking for acceptance anymore. I wasn't explaining myself. I had survived without them. When they stood to leave, my mother hesitated at the door. "Can we try again?" she asked softly. I didn't answer right away. I watched them step into the hallway, into a world where I no longer depended on their approval. The past had come knocking, but I hadn't opened the door out of need. I opened it out of choice. Revenge doesn't always arrive with raised voices or slammed doors. Sometimes it comes quietly, wrapped in peace, and that kind lasts longer. After my parents left, I sat alone for a long time, thinking about how badly I had wanted their approval once. I used to believe success meant proving them wrong. Now I understood something deeper. It meant no longer needing to prove anything at all. When the bank finally confirmed everything, the account was unfrozen. The numbers were still unreal, but the responsibility felt heavy and real. My grandfather hadn't saved that money for revenge. He had saved it for purpose. The first thing I did wasn't buy a mansion or a fleet of cars. I rented a modest home with sunlight in every room. I wanted space to heal before I wanted luxury. Then I started giving. I paid off the debts of strangers who reminded me of myself, people one bad month away from losing everything. I funded scholarships for students whose families couldn't support their dreams. Every scholarship carried my grandfather's name, because his belief had carried me when no one else would. The story about the inheritance spread. My parents heard it all, from relatives, from neighbors, from people who once looked down on me. They heard about the lives I was changing, the respect I had earned without asking for it. My mother sent a letter. Not a call, a letter written slowly, carefully. We failed you. She wrote, we chose fear over faith. I see now what we lost. I held that letter for a long time before setting it down. Forgiveness didn't rush in all at once. It came quietly, like dawn. I wrote back, I don't hate you. I told her, but I can't be the person I was. That version of me didn't survive. And that was the truth. I forgave them. Not to reopen doors, but to close wounds. They stayed in my life at a distance, where expectations couldn't hurt me again. The old bank card now sits framed on my desk, not as a symbol of wealth, but as a reminder of trust. My grandfather saw strength in me long before I learned to see it myself. My parents once believed kicking me out would teach me a lesson. They were right. It taught me that belonging doesn't come from blood. It comes from belief. And the sweetest revenge of all was this: I built a life so full, so grounded, and so kind that losing me became their greatest regret.